So now you're ready to knit a scarf made from your combined yarns that you selected from Lesson 54. And if you recall, we picked 3 strands of this gray with turquoise nubbies, a mohair, which has a lot of slubs on it, and this acrylic polyester yarn. This was a very cheap yarn that I got in a little skein from Big Lots. And I'll need to do a Russian join because I don't have enough yarn here. So I have 5 strands. Now if I haven't worked with this combination before, I won't be sure exactly how many stitches to put on or what size pipe to use. And it's really best to sample because you'll save yourself a lot of time in the long run. So be sure you keep these in a separate bin. Don't wind them up together because that adds, oftentimes it adds or even removes twist. And you can end up with a lot of problems. So just as always, keep them separated. And we'll just throw them into a bin on the floor. I'm going to use one bin for just this because we're not putting on a lot of stitches. And you'll also need to decide what kind of edge you want. On this example, this was the one I did that was 10 stitches across, and I did not do a chain edge. And you'll notice that there's ridges on both sides that's formed when you create the stitch. For our sample here, we're going to do it this way, and then we'll do a chain edge for the scarf on the next video. So for your sample, you just want to have on here enough that you can see your color combination, and you want to be able to see what size pipe you need. So we're going to put it on the size that's equal to a US 19 needle, and in this case it's our C PVC pipe, and which is made from hot water pipe, from the hardware store. So we're just going to put on about 6 stitches. If you don't want to use a knot, a slip knot, just take your yarn and you want to twist it clockwise 1.5 turns and put it on your pipe, and then holding your working yarn in your left hand, we're just going to use, or the working yarn in your right hand and the tail in your left hand, we'll just do a thumb cast on. So there's 2, 3, 4, and we'll put on 6, that's 5. Don't make them too tight. They should be able to move on there. And remember, a scarf is going to have some stretch to it, so you want to make sure that your cast on edge isn't too tight. So now you have 6 stitches on. And I would start, you want to have an even number, by the way, for a seed stitch, which is what these scarves were made with. And I would go ahead and start with the front stitch. So you want to have your tips a little closer together, and you want to remember, this is just kind of this is your tail from where you made your cast on. Leave it down and come in from underneath. You can push the yarns through or hook them with your fingers. And there is your front stitch. And your back stitch. And a front, and a back, so you have an even number of stitches. Every stitch is alternating as you move down the row, front, and every stitch will alternate. Now remember, this isn't a true stitch, if you will. All you did was twist that, so make sure that you don't drop that when you make your back stitch, and you've completed 1 row. Now, you want to start the next stitch, or the next row, in the same way with a front stitch, and that means you'll be front stitching where you did a back stitch. So there's your front, back, front, back. Again, just as a reminder, I don't see a bar across here. It's on this side. So I know I did this stitch as a front stitch, and the next one should be a back stitch. They're going to alternate across and up and down. And a front stitch, and a back stitch. Now notice in my clump of yarn in my hand, I have a big loop of yarn where it's stuck up on itself. And you want to make sure that as you're working your stitches that you occasionally reach down and comb those out and make sure you don't have a loopy yarn. That's a hard thing to correct. You can, once you've knit a piece, if you find that somewhere, you almost have to cut it and rejoin it. So every row is made the same way. So we're going to start this one again with a front stitch. And now a back. And a front. And a back. And a front. And a back. Now, let's go ahead and turn our stand. And you can see that there's a little bit of alpaca in here. Alpaca has these long hairs in it. So now, or that's probably from the mohair. Anyway, there isn't alpaca in this one. So now look again at my yarn, how it's kind of straighten that out. What you're looking for is the color combination, how dense it is, and how much space it takes up. These were 6 stitches. So if you want your scarf 10 inches apart or 10 inches wide when it's finished, you'll need to calculate how much you need to put on. And let's say, for instance, I have these 6, and I make yourself enough of a sample. Really, you would want to come out, 4-6 inches or something like that. And then measure and see what that is across from edge to edge without putting any weight on it. And it's roughly 4.5 inches, almost 5 if you include that nubby. And that's why I say go a little farther so you have a good sample to work with and see how it's really going to hang and drape. So let's say that that is 5 once I have a good section out. And I know I have 6 stitches. So if I have 5 inches and I divide it by the 6 inches, then I know each stitch is taking up 0.83 inches. And if I want my scarf, say 12 inches deep, I take 12 and I divide it by the 0.83. And I know I need, this says 14.46. I'm going to put on 14 stitches. And then that way you have a sample and then you'll be ready to knit.